Lovely, thanks very much indeed, Les. And firstly, thanks very much indeed for the invite to speak to this gathering here today. I think it's, wow, you know, we've got a lot of people crammed in here today. I think we didn't expect that we'd get such a lot of interest in this, so it's a great honour to be able to sort of present to this. Just to give you a bit of background about who I am, I'm Steve Walker. I'm the head of the offshore division of HSE, so I'm the sort of the offshore regulator. Been head of division for 3 years and worked in the offshore division for a total of nearly 9. I've been a regulator in HSE for too many years, really, 35 years plus, and I've certainly had experience of regulating lots of different industries. Offshore most recently, but I've done onshore, downstream, the railway industry, construction, agriculture, etc. And to be honest, I've been really impressed with the offshore industry, with the high level of acceptance of the importance of workforce engagement. It's not to say it's perfect, but certainly the profile which you have of involving those people on the shop floor is extremely impressive. So that's a good start. Part of my role has also been a member of the Step Change leadership team, and I'm very pleased that I've been, as part of my role in the leadership team, I also sit on the Workforce Engagement Steering Group, which Mike and Ian will talk to you later on, and therefore I've had some sort of role in the toolkit which is being rolled out today. I'm not going to be talking about the toolkit. Others are going to be talking about that in subsequent presentations. But I just wanted to really sort of paint a picture from my perspective, very much to complement what I think Jake is going to be saying later on from the trade union's perspective of why workforce engagement is important for us as a regulator. Because some people may say, well, why are we interested in that? We are just the hard-hatted bureaucrats. We have legislation. The legislation applies for the employer, applies to the contractor. It doesn't say anything about workforce engagement. So why are we actually interested in that? Well, I think it's if I can just, I'm getting this wrong now. Lovely. Why are we actually interested? And I think it should be a no-brainer, really, because the first thing, our job is not just to enforce the law, but our job is to make sure that we have acceptable safety standards offshore. And there's no doubt about it that it's going to be that the way you can deliver that is by having workforce engagement. Workforce engagement and involvement is effective. And the second thing, it's the law. It's the law stupid, as they say. And the rest of my sort of talk, I just want to go through those two areas just to expand them a little bit more. So, involving the workforce actually is common sense. And let's just put health and safety to one side. Let's just talk about just business. You should, if you are a high-performing organisation, be involving your workforce. We all should, as managers, we all should as senior sort of leaders, because it's just sort of sound business sense. If you want to have a workforce which is motivated, enthusiastic about the work, enthusiastic about delivering your business objectives, then you've got to involve them. You can't just use the mushroom synergy of sort of keeping them in the dark, and just feeding them from time to time. You can't do that if you are in a 21st century business, and that applies whether you're an operator, whether you're a contractor, whether you're a civil servant as well. We've got to sort of do that. So it's really important that you have good quality involvement. I think what that delivers is a common goal. You make sure that actually the people who are delivering your business are actually delivering what you want as the senior leaders in the business, and there is synergy and there is effectiveness. You're not wasting time, you're actually delivering what you say. So you've got to have good quality involvement for that. It makes better communication. We all know the problems which we have these days of remote working, of people sort of being out of the office, of the whole plethora of different communication mechanisms, whether it's email, whether it's Twitter, whether it's face-to-face. And throughout that, you've got to have good communication. And to have that good communication, you've got to have engagement, you've got to have involvement. Communication isn't just top-down, it's a two-way, or maybe even a multi-way thing. So you've got to make sure that you've got good involvement for that. I think we all appreciate, certainly as senior managers, that our workforce is our most important asset. We may well have, the hardware, the steel work, we may well have the finance, we may have the intellectual property rights, but it's our workforce which is our key assets. and therefore we want to develop those workforce, that workforce. We want to develop their potential. You can't do that in isolation. You've got to involve them. You've got to engage them. So overall, I think my view, and I strongly suspect that you all strongly agree with me here, that the only way is to involve your workforce if you want to have a good, effective business. But let's put in the safety dimension. You know, so what for health and safety? Does that actually make any difference? Is an engaged workforce a safer workforce? Well, I think from our perspective from a regulator, we strongly believe that. We've done some research, and we have found that those companies who do encourage workforce engagement and involvement of their trade unions, or their safety reps, of their employees, do have better safety records. I think it's a no-brainer, isn't it, that it's those people who are actually at the front line, who really do understand what the real hazards mean, and who have a different perception about the hazards, and a different viewpoint which perhaps engineers who are perhaps remote, supervisors who are not there at the workforce all the time, senior managers don't have. It's those people who are actually at the sharp end who actually do have a very important perspective and knowledge which nobody else has, so you've got to have them. You know, I think those people who actually are involved in the planning for safety, those people who can be involved in sorting out the precautions, contributing to risk assessments, etc., etc. If you've got them involved, then they are going to take much greater care of their own safety, much greater care of the safety of their colleagues. And I like to think of the jigsaw approach, whereby I think workforce involvement is a key jigsaw, a part of the jigsaw of the safety protection. You know, if you're looking at the barrier models, you know, the workforce are a key barrier. If you don't involve them, you're getting rid of that barrier and you're much more vulnerable. And lastly, I think we talk a lot about sort of safety culture in the offshore industry. Safety culture is a bit amorphous. You know, what exactly is it? It's very difficult to define, but we all know what it is when we see it. And you know, let's be honest, you can't have a safety culture without that workforce involvement. Because if you don't have that workforce involvement, there's a great big gap and you can't create that culture. And it's interesting, this approach is not new. If you go back to Lord Cullen, post-Piper Alpha, you know, 25 years ago will be next year, you know, Lord Cullen in his inquiry was talking about the whole workforce must be committed to safe working practices. The whole workforce needs to be involved. And I think if you don't get that engagement, there's a consequence. As inspectors and regulators, we investigate a lot of accidents, and we do see the consequences of, you know, poor communication with the workforce, poor risk assessment because the workforce haven't been involved, poor culture because perhaps the workforce feel they're discouraged from being involved, they feel perhaps slightly intimidated or whatever. So we see the consequences as regulators, you know, also every incident which we investigate, when you look at root causes, there's some bit of it which goes back to engagement. And I think common themes are, you know, sort of communications, you know, if communication is poor, things like handovers, toolbox talks, poor toolbox talks involvement, poor hazard in identification, or risk assessments which are mainly done right at the top but don't involve those people who are actually know a lot more about the particular task than anyone else does. Sort of management of overrides, you know, the workforce know, you know, the fiddles which are going on, you know, the things which aren't quite right. So, you know, please make sure you get that involvement, because if you don't have that engagement, things go wrong. And just putting up a few of the big incidents which have happened, you know, across industry, across the world over the last sort of 25 years. And if you read the reports of those, you will find within those reports, all of them will have some sort of snippets of information where you say, well, if only there'd been better engagement with the workforce, things would have turned out differently. So that's the soft side, you know, sort of business side. Yeah, you should do it if you want to have a good business. But I think as a regulator, I've got to be slightly harder because it's not only because it's a good thing, but it's also the legislation. I think it's difficult for me to say, here is the workforce engagement regulation, here is the safety culture regulation, because that's not how we do it in the UK. But I think the whole thread of the drive for workforce engagement and involvement is there along within a number of the regulations. It's starting with the offshore installations management and admin regulations, which really requires good cooperation and coordination between everybody offshore, contractors, employers, and the workforce. And then if you go to the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is the abiding sort of legislation which we've had since 1974 across all industrial activities in the UK. If you look at Section 2 and Section 7, real sort of expectations that the only way you can manage safely is to make sure you involve everybody who has that knowledge. So it's not just an optional extra that we're talking about today. There is a drive from the legislation. And I suppose the biggest and most visible part of that legislation is on safety reps, because they're seen as and we see them as a very important part of that workforce involvement engagement. They're not the only ones, they are representatives. You want to have an engagement wider than just safety reps, but the safety reps are pretty important, are very high profile, and we have that specific set of legislation which does set out both the roles of safety representatives and how they need to be involved as a representative of the rest of the workforce. As an example, within the SI 971 legislation, clear requirement for safety representatives to be involved in the safety case development, in the thorough reviews, and there's a clear requirement for contractors and duty holders to demonstrate to us as a regulator that they have involved the workforce via their safety representatives. And I picked that one out particularly because workforce involvement is not just the slips, trips and falls and dropped objects, etc., although those are extremely important. There is the involvement in the more subtler major hazard and process safety issues, which are a little bit more difficult, but are certainly areas where all companies can get great benefit from involvement of the workforce. So what do we do as regulators about trying to encourage your industry to have good workforce involvement? I think it's a great commitment from myself and from my inspectors. Whenever we go offshore, we will always meet with the safety representatives. That's a given, because that's part of our communication and encouraging the involvement. Almost inevitably, we will do that also via the safety committee offshore, and certainly the last sort of half a dozen offshore visits, I think I've always met the safety committee at some time during the 2 or 3 days I've been offshore. I think the other area where we have this commitment to the dialogue with the safety reps is our annual performance meetings with all our duty holders. Those are meetings which we hold in the spring. We expect very high level representation from duty holders, CEOs, MDs, etc. But we also expect safety reps to be there. So safety reps can be involved in that dialogue. They can see what we're talking to the companies about and what the duty holders are telling us about. So really important, we want to make sure that we give those a high profile. We look for evidence of workforce involvement throughout our inspections and particularly throughout our investigations and when we follow up from incidents, and also when we look at safety cases and thorough reviews. We act on information from the workforce. Occasionally we get anonymous complaints. We expect these to be followed through during your normal sort of operator procedures, but in the end, we are there to act as a backstop. We have a lot of involvement in step change, both myself on the senior leadership team, but also a lot of my colleagues on the various work groups, because we believe that step change is extremely important because it is tripartite. It does have, the operators, the workforce, and the regulators. That's really important. And one of my own committees, the Offshore Industry Advisory Committee, we have our own workforce involvement group, which has a lot of sort of parallels with the work which is done by Step Change. We're beginning to get a little bit closer to make sure we don't have any gaps or overlaps there. But that's very important. They've done a lot of work on advising us, and certainly in relation to the safety reps regulations. And we even have the HSE Play Your Part document, which once again highlights the importance of workforce involvement. How effective is that? Good in parts. I think we see some very good areas, some very good installations and duty holders with workforce involvement. Others are perhaps less so, so there are real lessons. We've used as a sort of a talisman is the compliance with the safety reps regulations. We did a big survey and inspection campaign about 18 months ago, and we found a sort of a mixed bag. We found that certainly there was room for improvement and scope for some of the poorer performers learning from some of the good performers, because actually there are some very good performers in relation to a safety rep compliance, and a lot of innovative work which was done on particular installations. And I think that shows the energy that there is within your industry for getting quality workforce involvement. And here are on the slide are some of the areas which are pretty simple to do, but are real demonstrations from duty holders that, yeah, they appreciate and value the work of safety reps and workforce involvement. So, my last slide here. Certainly, us as a regulator, we really welcome the initiative. It's taken a few years to come to fruition. We've been involved in it, and I think it's a very, very professional product which you'll see launched today. I'm very pleased that it's a visible commitment from your industry of the importance of workforce involvement. I do a lot of work internationally, and I'm not aware of any other countries, offshore industries, which are doing a similar sort of thing. So I think it's a first for the UK, and I think that's very, very good. I see it very much as a positive contribution to raising the game within the industry in the UK. It's going to be a driver for change. If it's just going to be shelfware, if it's just going to sit there and do nothing, it fails. But I've a lot of belief that this will be a driver for change. And I'm very pleased that it's an opportunity for you as an industry to be very much more visible, because you can use the survey to benchmark, you know, both between your own installations, between operators, and also as the industry, as we see how workforce involvement gradually improves year on year. Thanks very much indeed.